Chapter 2 of the Story of Ancient Irish Civilization. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Ashley Jane. The Story of Ancient Irish Civilization by P.W. Joyce. Chapter 2. How the Warlike Old Irish Conquered Foreign Lands. From the remotest times the Irish had a genius for war and a love of fighting. And if it fell within the scope of this narrative, it would be easy to show that these features in our character have come down to the present day. For good or for bad, we are, and always have been, a fighting race. In the old times, the Scots, as the Irish were then called, were well known for their warlike qualities, and very much dreaded, so that fabulous rumours regarding them ran among some of the people of the continent. One Latin writer tells us that Irish mothers were wont to present the first food on the point of a sword to their newly born male infants as a sort of dedication to war. This is certainly an invention, for it is not mentioned in our own records, but it indicates the character the Irish people had earned for themselves abroad. They fought a great deal too much among themselves at home, but in this respect they were not a bit worse than the English people at the time of the Heptarchy, or then the continental nations of the same period. That the old Irish should be warlike is only what we might expect, seeing that they were in great measure descended from the continental Gauls, who in ancient times were renowned as warriors and conquerors. But mighty as the Gauls were, and though they were at least as brave as the Romans, they were subdued in the end by superior discipline when Julius Caesar invaded them. And so with the old Irish. Though they were fierce and strong, and taken man for man quite a match for the Anglo-Normans, they were forced, after a long struggle, to yield to silence, skill, and discipline when they were invaded by that people, then the greatest warriors in the world. The Irish were not content with fighting at home, but made themselves formidable in foreign lands. Their chief foreign conquests were in Wales and Scotland, but they frequently found their way to the continent. Irish literature of every kind abounds in records of foreign raids, invasions, and intermarriages. And in many particulars these native accounts are borne out by authorities that no one questions, namely Roman classical writers, whenever they find occasion to touch on these matters. Those who have read the early history of England will remember that the Picts and Scots, marching southwards from the Scottish Highlands, gave much trouble year after year for a long period to the Romans and Britons. The Picts were the people of Scotland at the time, and the Scots were the Irish, who, crossing over to Alban or Scotland in their curragh fleets, joined the Picts in their formidable raids southwards. We know all this, not only from our own native historians, but also from Roman writers, who tell us how the Romans had often to fight in Britain against the Scots from Ireland. In order to protect the British people against these two fierce nations, the Romans, at different intervals in the 2nd and 3rd centuries, built great walls or ramparts from sea to sea between Britain and Alban, of which the ruins are still to be seen, one beginning at the Frith of Clyde and another at the Solway Frith. For several hundred years, from the 3rd to the 6th century, and even after, the Irish streamed continually to Scotland across the narrow sea. The first of these migrations, of which we have reliable accounts, originated in a famine, exactly as the great exodus of our own day from Ireland to America was set going by the terrible famine of 1847. And this migration is related partly by old Irish writers and partly by the great English historian, the Venerable Bede. The famine in question fell on Munster early in the 3rd century, so that numbers of people were forced to leave the province. One particular chief led a great host of fighting men, with their families, northwards till they reached the extreme district now known as the County Antrim. Here they divided, and while one part remained in Ireland, i.e. in Antrim, the other part, under the same leader mentioned above, crossed over to Alban or Scotland, where they settled down. From this time forward there was a continual migration, year after year, from the northern coast to Scotland, till, after the lapse of about 3 centuries, occurred the greatest invasion of all, led by 3 brothers, Fergus, Angus, and Lorne, in the year 503. It has been already related in our histories of Ireland, and need not be repeated in detail here, how these colonists ultimately mastered the country over which their first king, Fergus, ruled; how they gave Scotland its name; how the subsequent kings of Scotland were the direct descendants of Fergus; and how from him again, through the Stuarts, descend in one of their lines of pedigree our present royal family. At about the same period the Irish mastered and peopled the Isle of Man, and for centuries there was constant intercourse between the parent people of the north-east coast of Ireland and this little colony. Though the Norsemen wrested the sovereignty of this island from them in the 9th century, they did not succeed in displacing either the Gaelic people or their language. The best possible proof that the Irish colonized and held possession of Man for ages is the fact that the Manx language is nothing more than Irish Gaelic, slightly changed by lapse of time. There are also still to be seen all over the island Irish buildings and monuments mixed up, however, with many of Norse origin, and the great majority of both the place names and the native family names are Gaelic. In our historical books we have accounts of migrations of Irish people to Wales, some as invaders intending to return, some as colonists purposing to settle and remain. At this time the Romans were masters of England and Wales, but they were not as mighty a people in the 4th century as they had been previously. For on the continent the northern barbarians were pressing on them everywhere, and in Britain the Picts and Scots, as we have said, kept continually harassing them from the north. These raids became at last so intolerable that the Roman government sent an able general named Theodosius, father of Emperor Theodosius the Great, to Britain to check them. At the very time that Theodosius was in Britain, a brave and strong-handed king reigned in Tara, named Criffan, A.D. 366 to 379, who on several occasions invaded Britain and took possession of large tracts, so that he is called in our old records Criffan the Great, King of Ireland and of Albion to the British Channel. The Roman historians tell us that Theodosius succeeded in beating back the Picts and Scots, and even chased them out to sea, in which there is probably some exaggeration, as there is, no doubt, on the part of our own historians in calling Criffan King of Albion to the British Channel. Criffan was succeeded by Niall of the 9 Hostages, A.D. 379 to 405, who was still more distinguished for foreign conquests than his predecessor. He invaded Britain on a more extensive and formidable scale than had yet been attempted, and swept over a large extent of country, bringing away immense booty and whole crowds of captives, but was at length forced to retreat by the valiant Roman general Stilicho. On this occasion a Roman poet, praising Stilicho, says of him, speaking as Britannia, "By him I was protected when the Scot, i.e. Niall, moved all Ireland against me, and the ocean foamed with their hostile oars." For the extensive scale of these terrible raids we have the testimony of the best possible authority, St. Patrick, who in his Confession, speaking of the expedition in which he himself was taken captive, probably that led by Niall, says, "I was about 16 years of age when I was brought captive into Ireland with many thousand persons." The preceding were warlike raids, but no doubt while the main body of the host returned on each occasion to their homes in Ireland, large numbers remained and settled down in Wales. But we have an account of at least one expedition undertaken with the direct object of colonizing. In the 3rd century a powerful tribe called the Desi who occupied the territory of Dees, near Tara, were expelled from the district by King Cormac mac Art for a serious breach of law. Part of these went to Munster and settled in a territory which still bears the name, the Barony of Deasis in Waterford. Another part, crossing over to Wales under one of their leaders, took possession of a district called Dyfed, where they settled down and kept themselves distinct as an immigrant tribe, speaking their own language for generations, till at length they were absorbed by the more numerous population around them, just as, many centuries later, the Anglo-Normans who came to Ireland were absorbed by the Irish. We are told in Cormac's glossary that in those times it was quite a usual thing for Irish chiefs to own two territories, one in Ireland and the other in Wales, and that they visited and lived in each by turns, as suited their convenience or pleasure. And the Irish chiefs often crossed over to receive the tributes due to them from their Welsh possessions. Plain marks and tokens of these migrations and settlements exist in Wales at the present day, as we are told by eminent Welsh writers who have examined the question. Numerous places are still called after Irishmen, as for instance Holyhead, of which the Welsh name means the Rock of the Gaels. The Irish, wherever they settled down in Wales, built for themselves circular forts, as was their custom at home in Ireland. Many of these remain to this day, and are called Irishmen's cottages. Moreover, the present spoken Welsh language contains a number of Irish words, borrowed by the people from their Irish neighbours in days of old. All this we are told, as already stated, by several great Welsh scholars. End of chapter 2.